Namaste and in Lak'ech, and welcome to this episode of One World in a New World. I'm your host, Zen Benefiel, and this week's guest is a dynamic gentleman from Britain. His name is Charles Whitaker. He is an emotional health consultant who enhances leadership for senior leaders and business owners. So this ought to be a great conversation to bring out the inner and the outer recognition and blending that he was able to manage throughout his career and the difference that it made. So stay tuned. Welcome, Charles. Glad to have you here. So wonderful to have this opportunity, and thank you for showing up.
Sure, pleasure.
Wonderful. So in our prelim, we talked about the general flavor and that, the precept for the show or the premise for this show is to bring out those inner conversations that we rarely talk about, when they began occurring and how those were able to be used throughout our lives in order to gain better traction in them, right? So how did you begin? What kind of, most of my guests have some kind of experience in their life that opened them up to a world within. What was yours like?
I'm scanning through time and trying to pinpoint, if I can, a moment in time where I became a parent of the inner world.
Mm.
And I suspect it was always there in one way or another, but no, I didn't formally recognize it as in any practical way until 10 what are we now, maybe 15 years ago, going back to say 2008. What's that? Yeah, well that's
Right.
that's 15,
Yeah,
16
I
years.
know that it's difficult when you get to be our age, right? It's like, when
So
was that? Right? Because it just
yeah,
seems like yesterday.
yeah, sure, but there's lots of things rolling through then. But yes, I mean we could sort of use that as a jumping off point anyway. And
What was going on at that time? What were you wrestling with that got you to dive inside and inquire?
yeah, my background is I was the senior leader in the manufacturing business, and in many ways, in that role, I was following my own inner light, because I just that's the way I work. Um,
Kind of
but
a natural servant leader, is that what you're alluding to, where you paid more attention to what those around you needed and supplying that rather than what your own agenda was? Or was it a combination of
a
it?
combination of those, I think, is only about my own agenda, but largely it was very much around how I could benefit the business and where the business could grow.
Mm-hmm.
And for that, it was important to be able to look after my team of very different people, to be able to help them to ride the waves. But I also became aware that the years were passing me by, and my physical body wasn't quite as uh, dynamic as it had been. So I started studying clinical hypnotherapy.
Now, that's a very interesting subject and quite profound in its applications, isn't it?
Yeah, and there were two key moments in that whole program, because I did 3 years of that. I mean, you can go and you
Hmm.
can go and study hypnotherapy in a weekend here in this country and call yourself a hypnotherapist. But I did 3 years, and I learned a lot. In the middle year, there were two particular occasions where something really clicked. But also in that middle year, I did a masterclass. And the masterclass was empowerment through the use of archetypes, which I've now turned into my program based on Campbell's Hero's Journey, called Find Your Hero Within.
Right. I
But
love that series that Bill Moyers hosted with him.
yeah, yeah,
That was so powerful and still is.
yes, yeah, yeah, yeah. But I mean, the book, The Hero with a Thousand Faces, is immense. I mean, it's actually, to write that book, it's a colossal piece of work.
Hmm.
Colossal piece of work. And then the book that I refer to in the program, Find Your Hero Within, is by Carol S. Pearson, who wrote a book about empowering archetypes. She identified 12 empowering archetypes. So it was when I did that masterclass that things, I think that was the moment when it started at least to sort of fall into place. Yes, it was probably already running years before, but then things started to fall into place.
Did you find that with those aspects, the 12 areas, that kind of gave you a structure from which to view things a little differently, and that opened up your ability to see things a little more as well?
Um, I think it gave I think it helped me to be clear about my agenda in life, where I was
Mhm.
going, have a clear vision as to what I wanted my life to be going. And I've still got the notes from 2005. I have those notes still, just
How
next
often
to
do
me.
you refer to them?
I haven't looked at them for quite a while, but whenever I'm running my own program, I check them out, and they're all still playing out. Quite amazing.
Do you
So
find that in the writing of them, as you were writing it down, that it helped to anchor those precepts almost unconsciously in you as you were exploring building your
yeah,
own program and
yeah.
understanding yourself a bit more in the process?
Yeah, it was interesting though because it led on. It's where it also led from there, which wasn't in my stars, if you will. It wasn't in those notes. It was like just sort of I started following my own star in a different way, if you will.
Hmm. How
So
did you find that coming out of the clinical hypnotherapy? And I'm also I didn't do the weekend thing. However, I've spent some time with hypnotherapy as well. It's fascinating as what it can do and how it can help folks.
mm,
Did you find that in applying those things for yourself and looking through those archetypes that you were able to see yourself in various aspects of them as well?
yeah, sure, yeah, yeah, no doubt about it. I mean, the 12 empowering archetypes are actually present in all of us. Um, and it's learning to recognize them in ourselves and in others.
Hmm. Do you
So
find them as patterns or, because I look at things from a system standpoint, and especially with the various numbers and the things that represent them, like even with the 12. One of the things that I based the efforts of planetary citizens on is the co-creation wheel that came out of spiral dynamics, which is a
uh,
12 sector um,
yep,
perspective of how the world works and the things that are working in it systematically to have it as a holistic unit, which we don't really consider because we're too busy in our specific areas. So in that, did you explore how those dynamics of the individual aspects that you saw in each kind of came together and formed a whole? And where did you take that?
yeah. I probably focused on the particularly building on the magician was for me the core of that,
Hmm.
and so it was at the heart and center, and then being aware of the other ones to be able to step into those as I went along. So they wanted to call in something from another archetype, the innocent, or whichever one was needed, then I could step into those.
It's kind of like the Bono's six hats, right?
Yeah, kind of. Yeah,
Only
yeah.
doubled, where you've got you're looking at things from all those different perspectives and uniting them somehow, finding a harmony in those patterns that
I think,
work for you and creating the flow.
yeah, I totally agree with you. It's a bit like the bonus six thinking hats. You can sort of step from one to the other
Mhm.
and test them out, and then bring them together. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
That in that experience, were there certain aha moments that you had where, um, and I'm asking the question from this perspective, right? The Vedantic philosophy, I'm going to leap good. I'm going to go in the Wayback Machine from about 15,000 years ago. We got the memo that from the Vedas that we're all divine threads incarnate, um, connected to a source and working together as capable of working together as a whole with what they refers to as like embodying God consciousness, right? So that's where everything works together. From that perspective, how did you see this opening to infinite intelligence that was specific to your path, and what kinds of things showed up in serendipitous moments or synchronicities or things like that that gave you evidence that you were following your North Star?
I think that came later. I think that was the spark that started something moving. In those days, and I think the magazine still exists, there was a magazine in this country called Kindred Spirit.
Hmm.
And I think in those days, it was monthly, and I would read this fairly assiduously, and it was all full of also color healing and shamanism and all sorts of
I would
fascinating.
suspect Alison Bourne might have had some articles in there. She's a friend of mine that lives in Britain
Okay,
that does color healing therapy.
okay, could
Color,
well
color breathing, I believe it is.
color breathing. Okay, fine, yeah. So anyway, the one thing that I didn't look at in that magazine, or rather I dismissed, was a rather stern photograph, pretty well every month, of Barbara Brennan, advertising Barbara Brennan's School of Healing. Have you heard of Barbara Brennan?
No, I can't say that I have. I've heard of lots of books, but there's many more I haven't.
Barbara Brennan was
Barbara
something.
Brennan.
Yeah.
Somehow, yeah, it's familiar, but please.
She was remarkable. She has left us since, but
Hmm.
she was remarkable. She had she had a master's degree in cloud physics and worked for NASA. So she was
Okay.
so she was no scientific slouch. And bear in mind, my own background is in applied science, so there's a kind of ready connection that she wasn't exactly woo-woo.
Right. We always look for that. I know I do. The validation
Yeah,
of a spiritual axiom, I guess, for lack of a better,
yeah,
showing up with scientific proof.
yes, yeah. So what Barbara had done, she had transmuted herself from being a NASA scientist through various stages into being a spiritual healer, to the extent that she set up her own spiritual healing school, the Barbara Brennan School of Healing.
Hmm.
And it was a 4-year program.
It's pretty intense.
It was. It was five separate weeks for 4 years.
And did you
Uh,
participate in that as part of your journey as well?
Part of my journey. That's one thing led to another. When I the thing that I said, I was looking at this magazine every month, and I saw the photograph of her. It was rather cool photograph, and I never appealed to me. Then one month there was an interview with her, and I read the interview, and that was it. I
So,
had I had to do that program.
and that's usually the way our paths unfold. There's a certain sense inside of us that we don't necessarily understand, yet we can't deny it at all. That
Yeah,
gut feeling, right? I find that, and you're probably familiar with this too, the indigenous philosophy of three brains, the gut, the heart, and the head. And
absolutely. Yeah,
the gut is where we're connected to the vibratory world, which we're now finding out through quantum physics is all there is. And then the heart decides, okay, is this resonant or not resonant?
yeah,
And then we can make choices because we have better information that's flowing up
yeah,
instead of trying to think through things in a system built on vibration when objectively our methodology ought to be sensing our way.
yeah.
So how did that sensory experience expand for you?
Well, the first thing is that it was the promise, if that's what we can call it, from the program was twofold. One was it was about personal development. And the other one that was that in the process of personal development, he became a spiritual healer.
Mhm.
And there was part of me which a limiting belief that was that I could, me, a spiritual healer, ah,
I can't do that.
not 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 likely somehow. But anyway, I did the program. I went through 4 years, and I got a certificate, which was quite amazing, really
Mhm.
amazing. It was a testament to so many different things. But it was a brilliant school. I learned so much, and I had some wonderful teachers, some wonderful fellow students. And it's the kind of thing that when you've spent 4 years of your life doing something, it stays with you.
Absolutely.
And inevitably, whilst I don't practice as a spiritual healer, or not in any cognitive way, it informs me who I am, how I am. And so,
Go ahead. I'll put that on pause. There was a question there. I'll ask it in a moment.
and somewhere along those years, I did listen to the recordings of spiral dynamics, which you mentioned a few minutes ago, and I absorbed that, and that was also very interesting. I haven't really followed that through, but halfway through
Oh,
the
that's not a
program,
12. That's a 9. Right. As far
okay,
as the number of
yeah,
components in it and systems, there's some others that I spoke with Dr. Irvin Laszlo about. I'll
okay.
mention those in a moment. Please continue.
Well, then halfway through with training with Barbara Brennan, my mentor, because when you go through the school of Barbara Brennan, you have to have a mentor who sits outside the school, but is preferably has been through the school, so they know what the training is about.
Hmm.
And so the mentor I'd chosen for myself was a shaman. She'd been a teacher with Barbara Wren, but had left. And then she had started to set up her own training school for shamanic practice. And she'd started in California, and then she brought it to Europe. So I started adding that into my training as well. So halfway through Barbara Brennan, 3 times a year, I traveled to Germany because the Barbara Brennan School of Healing was actually in Austria in those days. It's
Hmm.
now actually in the UK. It's a slightly different name. So I then did a 3-year program learning to be a shamanic practitioner. I was never very accomplished in that, but I did stay on to do 3 years as teaching on the same program, supporting on the same program, which is good fun.
Well, isn't
And
it
then,
interesting how the rabbit hole develops?
yes,
Where
yes,
you start to go in and I call it like, self-awareness is like a slinky. We
yeah,
fall into it and then just have to roll with the dissension down into the depths of our being in order to find ourselves.
yeah.
It's a very interesting process. And now in that shamanic healing place, what did you find that you were able to bring into the outer world from that place and apply it in the initial stages, anyways, you were developing your own program?
The sense that it's about inside out,
Mm.
that I see all sorts of very valid and important work on teaching leaders to be good leaders in terms of characteristics, styles, behaviors. But for me, what is often missing is they don't address the inner component. They don't go inside. It's the external behaviors. And leadership, for me, is an inside job.
Hmm. Life. in general, for me, what I found out, I'm still kind of young, I guess, at 66.
Yeah,
You find out that it really is an inside job. It's the
yeah,
choices we make, the decisions, and what we pay attention to, what we intend to have happen, and then our interactions toward that actually move it along, and we begin to eliminate the distractions and those self-deprecating thoughts within those 70,000 thoughts we're supposed to have a day, right?
yeah.
So how did this inner um, into the outer world process, what did you find was the path that seemed to flow the best for you in the display and the reception of it? How was that received when you first began?
And I think it had all sorts of consequences in my personal life,
Mhm.
rather than my business life. It inevitably, or not inevitably, but it led to my marriage breakup, which was perhaps ordained. That's what happened anyway.
Oh,
And
and here's one of the aspects of that. We think that um, we make choices and believe that that life's going to be linear from that place and that everything's going to work out.
yeah,
And vibrationally speaking, if there's an imbalance and one's growing one way, one's growing another, there's nothing wrong with that. It's just no longer compatible.
yeah,
And why would you want to force things that are obvious that there's a lack of resonance at a core level that's, I don't want to say insurmountable, yet it's just not appropriate for the development of the individual relationships. And so there's that separation to move on in hopefully greater ways for each. And yet we're kind of plugged into that patriarchal, paper commitment, if you will.
yeah, yeah. Yes, I agree. There's until we sort of start to explore ourselves more deeply and our inner workings, life maybe has a kind of linear quality about it. We go to school, we go to university, we go to get the job, and da 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 da, and we
Mhm.
retire. We get the watch and we retire. No, we don't. But that was the old sort of way, the old school way of doing things. But life is never linear.
Absolutely true.
Fortunately, and there's always something to explore. My own sort of curiosity led me onto all sorts of things. It actually led me back to doing clinical hypnotherapy, which I thought I was going to give up, but it took me back. It took me back to that, which I thoroughly enjoy. The
And
big
let me ask you a question, because I know when I went through the program, I got as much, I'll say, in the practice with others, right? Because you pair up and you practice with each other, and it's up to you how deep you go,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
right? And so that gave me tremendous opportunity to explore and investigate other worlds within me. Did you find the same thing to be true with you?
More when I did the shamanic work. That was taking me deeper,
Hmm.
exploring the worlds and going on journeys was very, very profound.
And being in a safe place with um, the advantages of someone that hopefully knew what they were doing.
Yes,
Because
precisely.
you're in that environment that's specifically developed for that to take place.
Yeah.
So there's a certain amount of integrity there that you can trust and therefore more fully let go in your own exploration. But did you find that to be true?
Yes, that's essential to be able to let go completely. You do have to have trust. Having that
Hmm.
trust is an essential component to know that we are being held in the physical reality, so we can go and come back again, and know
Sure.
that we'll be added back again.
What
Yeah.
do you find, since the subject of trust has come up, what do you find to be the detriments or the distractions to being able to trust in your work and what you've found uh, in your own personal environment?
Ooh, that's a big one. Um,
One we don't talk about too much.
it's very true. We don't talk about trust very much, and yes, it's essential for so many things and at different layers and levels.
Hmm.
Um, for me, it has become increasingly intuitive because I don't sit down and plan out my life in any formal way. My guidance is totally from within, and I just follow wherever that takes me, and wherever that takes me is where I'm going. I just follow that.
Right.
So that's
In that, which is that's flow for me. When you're just, you've made a choice, you're moving toward, the universe supports it, and it creates that
yeah.
opportunistic, sensation that you feel is anticipation. In that, did you find that the process began to show you in, because most often we want to find references, right? We want to do research and find validation for our own personal experiences because they're kind of weird. Nobody else is addressing that. Do you find that these types of understandings were also present in references that you were able to find, or did you even explore those?
Not in a formal sense, but the thing that occurs to me is that the fact that I follow my inner guidance is um, indicative to me that there is a deep level of trust within me about my own core.
But isn't that the
Which,
essence of pretty much all the spiritual teachings?
but coming to yes, but coming to recognize that and accept it was the major transformation.
Right. Absolutely. And it's like the whole nature of trust. We talk about it. We talk about the activity of it, and yet we don't talk about the process
Yes.
involved in the discernment and the ability to find our way in those things that we can trust to be true. Now, how do we seek, Howard Bloom made a great statement years ago. He says, my life, he found out he was an atheist right before his bar mitzvah. Kind of a tough thing to do, right?
Yeah.
So, but he says, the objective that he found in life was to seek the truth no matter what, including his life if necessary, no matter what, including his life if necessary, and to pay attention to what's right under his nose.
Yeah.
Now, those are the kinds of things that the essence of that is kind of the commitment that you make to yourself in that process. So would you find that to be congruent?
Yes. Yes.
Now, in that, did you find that there were ways of trusting to where even the depth of fear, we have a list of fears that we have, and the top one, uh, oddly enough, is public speaking. That's above death and divorce. The death thing, how do we navigate the release of the attachment to perceiving that we have a limited lifespan? Is that even possible in order to be more fully in the present?
I don't have an answer to that.
It's a tough question, right? The one that I've also been, it's like, okay, these questions come up and like Rilke says, you don't necessarily get the answers right away. The fact that you have the questions now offers the opportunity for life to give you the answer through your experience.
Yes.
It's the pursuit of that, the seeking the truth at all costs, right? How did you find that process for you in putting together um, this inner awareness that you had and then finding ways to articulate it to others that actually made sense?
It was a a process of allowing, I think. And it kind of unfolded in its own ways, in its own time. And then it was hidden from me. It just became apparent. So it wasn't, there was no structure to it, no obvious structure to it.
Mm-hmm.
But inside our minds work in wonderful ways, which we're not always privy to understanding, which is good. Well, probably. And so I think that just allowing that to happen and having that trust to allow these things to unfold is perfectly okay with me. I don't need more than that.
Mm-hmm.
I know that this is just where I need to go.
Right.
It doesn't matter what you think, he thinks, she thinks, anybody thinks. I know this is okay.
Yeah. And
And
the
this is
paradox to that, which truth has, right, is that it does matter what people think, feel, and believe about you in order to find that bridge between the two, which is where the articulation process comes in, right? How did that process evolve for you?
I think the articulation process is still something evolving for me.
Mm.
That's perhaps my biggest next step is to become better at articulating that process.
Well, there's
I
many
don't.
examples of it in the past that we can refer to, right? And bring it up present and in a sense, harvest our past rather than drag it with us. And
Sure, yeah.
in that, do you see in this process of the evolution of leadership, which is kind of what we're talking about, the old processes, but let's just look at the industrial age, right? It was a very matter-of-fact, command and control, linear driven in all aspects of life. And now we're realizing, oops, right? There were some things that we missed along the way. We weren't paying attention to how we affect the world around us and especially nature, right? We've got to the point where we've polluted air, water, and land to the point where it's in some places catastrophic. Now, how do we then recoup or harvest that oops and then make changes toward the future and the kind of leadership that we empower and demand?
By letting go of the ego and looking around and listening. I mean deep listening. Listening is badly practiced. Listening takes years and years of skill, and I'm not saying I'm not saying I'm wonderful at listening, far from it. But to be able to recognize where we're at developmentally,
Mm-hmm.
recognizing where we've come from over the last 250 years or whatever it is since the Industrial Revolution,
Right.
we have to listen with our eyes, ears, all our senses to pick up all the clues from the world around us.
Absolutely. That's the
And until we really do that, we're not going to get on and look after the world the way we know we need to.
do you
Or is
see that in process? Because there's several aspects of a new world order, if you will, that are being proposed, and one's Chinese, one's Islamic, and one's the World Economic Council or Forum. So how do we navigate those to not think our way through this system built on vibration, but to actually sense our way through? Because those three elements are still prescriptive and assertive rather than embracing and supportive of any kind of natural order that's evolving in all of us rather than those who want to control.
no easy answer, but the start is to I'm picking up on what Lonnie said at the bench recently, and I thought it was very profound when she talked about acceptance is necessary for peace. So when we take those three different forums, it's about acceptance and listening. Each of these has something to contribute.
Hmm.
Nobody is wiser than anybody else. But the only way it can ever bring about some unification to allow us to do what is really called for is to stop, listen, and from that we can accept and then find peace and the way to go forward.
Hmm. And the miscommunications that take place. One of the things that a mentor that had explained to me years ago is that, and he was a lawyer, mediator, um, mentor as well. And he said that, there really is no conflict. What happens is there miscommunication. Parties
Yeah.
show up at the table, speaking and listening from different dictionaries, and they have no clue what the other dictionaries are.
Yep.
And so they're listening and hearing from their own rather than being open to having an apocalyptic chat, right? Where they're uncovering the knowledge of the others. That's the active listening process. And it's more than just actively listening to what's being said. It's the curiosity to go further and explore and really try to understand the other's position before doing anything.
Because
Find that to be true?
yes, because they're end gaming or end gaining.
Hmm.
They're seeking the end before they do the process in the middle.
Right.
Can't wait to get to
Also,
it.
which is often a zero sum in that
Yeah,
respect.
yeah, yeah, for sure.
How do you see the work that you're doing contributing to this opening of further explanation in the workplace? Because there's so many systems that we have to address with this new knowledge, if you will, because you're not the only one. There, pretty much all
Hmm.
my guests say, okay, this is what's going on, and we see this. It's the opportunity to engage it in practical and pragmatic ways that we're having challenges with. How do you see that initially having a ripple effect through leadership in various ways through companies and corporations and organizations?
It's simply through conversation and finding out where other people are, and then we can sort of start to engage from that process of having found out where people are and accepting where they are to help them to sort of
Hmm.
have different perspectives.
Now, how often do we run into confirmation bias and bias period in the process of that? Because these are, we have such deep cultural, even genetic memories
Absolutely.
from previous, that come up, and we don't necessarily know where they come from. They could be unconscious behaviors. They could be learned prejudices that
Yeah.
we've grown up with. How do we navigate through that recognition in ourselves that blocks that ability to understand the other?
I think we need a good quality mentor to be able to do this kind of work. Somebody who can sit with us and listen and help us to explore, because none of us knows. We all know what's inside us, but in terms of helping us to be able to harness that
Hmm.
in the best possible way, having a mentor who can sit with us and listen and help us to shape that and guide us. I think that's going to be one of the keys here, Zen.
Now, is that kind of what you learned through Barbara's program?
Partly through Barbara's program and subsequently, yes. Yeah.
So kind of what I hear you saying is that incorporating these types of philosophies along with the other systems management philosophies is probably one of the better ways to begin to move forward. Am I hearing you correctly?
Yes, I think that's
And
fair.
I
Yeah.
am in agreement with that. I've written several books to that effect.
Okay. Good.
One of my most recent is called Navigating Holistic Growth, the Servant Leader's Guide. And it's a peer into the organizational development aspects that include the references and acknowledgement of these kinds of intuitive, natural conversations that need to take place, and that we often have this natural inclination to look out more for others than ourselves.
Yeah.
In so doing, by having that ability to see the structures and help to navigate them, it kind of puts us in a catbird seat, if you will, to facilitate.
Yeah. Yeah.
Uh,
I'd like the reference to that book, please. Afterwards, you can let me send it to me afterwards, please. Yeah.
Now, how do you see that, as I mentioned before, how do you see this process rippling through the thoughtmosphere, if you will, for the shift in leadership that it seems life is begging for today?
I'm not seeing it.
It's an honest answer. I spoke with John Hewitt the other day, who's the founder of Liberty Tax, which now is a $1.5 billion company. And he felt the same thing. We were talking about customer service, which is a good indicator, right? That's where the servant leadership shows up, is how well the customer service agents are trained, and how attentive and service oriented from a customer service perspective they are. So and he says it's just horrible. He says it's been on, he's watched the decline. I've experienced it, you've experienced. How do you think we can shift that? And is it something that now, with the advent of AI and the interactive quality that it has, with emotional intelligence, I might add, from my own interactions with ChatGPT and what I find from others too. Do you think that that might be one of the potential solutions that we could use?
I've no doubt about that we can harness AI, ChatGPT towards these ends, because it's actually fascinating what it can do. And the latest version can actually, I was listening to, can't remember his first name, Hinton. I can't remember his first name, but he's a well-known computer scientist and cognitive psychologist, I think.
Mhm.
And he was being interviewed, and he was saying that the latest one can actually create new thought. It is actually very, very, very creative, and it is building on thing. It can create ideas which were not part of the large language learning.
Sure. Well, and that's like what we do, right? We have these data strings that we jump forth, and we put all this logic,
Yeah,
deductive or otherwise, it's sometimes faulty, right? We can still take people just because it sounds good. However, in the um, lining up of those data points, it gives the opportunity to leap into something new because you've already got the data, if you will, from which to formulate new questions.
yes, yeah. You could that would be a very useful tool. The other thing is that it's also about people coming together. No one person will ever do this alone. It's about like-minded people finding common cause and working as an ensemble, as a collective,
Mhm.
and then using the power of ChatGPT,
Right.
etc., to bring about that change.
Kind of a decentralized global society
Yeah,
that's supportive of all the parts. This is where we're going with planetary citizens and dividing those concerns up into the 12 sectors and finding those that are at the top of their fields in those sectors currently, and then tapping into their information, knowledge, and wisdom to share that with the coming generation so that they're more prepared for the future with better questions, first of all, because
yeah.
they've got better information from which to move from it. And would you say that in referencing the Gen Zers, they're not attached to the old systems at all. They're just seeking a way to move forward as best they can, given the limited information and life experience they have. And yet there's this quest for more, greater understanding, greater connectivity, sharing as opposed to hoarding, and those kinds of things. Do you see that that generation is an up and coming force to be empowered, I guess would be the best?
I certainly hope so.
Well, it's up to us, isn't it? I mean, that's the whole purpose of you and I
I-
talking, is to be able to share this, whatever wisdom we may have garnered or think we have, to at least state it to where, okay, folks can reflect on it. They can resonate, not resonate, take it in, make it their own, not sound so crazy to themselves now because they've heard others that speak the same thing similarly, and it's close enough to where it resonates with them somehow. This is the conversations you were talking about, or these are the conversations you were talking about earlier, the types of things that help move things forward. Do you see that those conversations are having a little more growth, even slightly, in the leadership circles?
I certainly see Gen Zers wanting to make the difference and not yet knowing how they can. I'm not familiar with whether it's impacting leadership circles. It'd be difficult if it wasn't.
Mm.
If people are looking at what's happening in the world, I think given the level of reaction we see, both in your country and mine, in the political sense, we see a lot of reaction to what Gen Zers are endeavoring to do, a reaction in the sense that they're being pushed down.
Well, and change, right? The first thing we do for change, most of us, is resist it instead of embrace it.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's that sense, that gut sense, right? That when something is about to take place or in process of, we get this quivering. I'll
Yeah.
just call it that. And if we're really concerned about control, then we're going to interpret that as anxiety. And we're going to be wondering what's coming up, and we're going to be slightly tense and fearful of it.
Yeah.
Then on the other hand, if we're looking through the other lens, which is one of trust, let's go there, that sensation will turn into anticipation of something new, greater, fun, even. And because we know the process, having gone through it enough times, where those who haven't, and this might be like with COVID, right? There was a huge number of people that's like, oh man, they didn't know what to do. So we had them sequester and obsess on self-hygiene, which behavior mod style, and the transition or the trickle through of that would turn inward for self-examination.
Mhm.
And a lot of folks did that. We're even part of a bench, a friendship bench, that was the result of people wanting to seek each other to get through this together. And that's just one reference. There are dozens, maybe hundreds. I mean, with only one person, you only got time to do so much, right? So this, apparently you do see this beginning to happen. What do you think is a milestone that we might observe as to at least the considerations of this kind of openness and inquiry into where we can go collectively in order to not just sustain, but thrive?
Citizens groups.
We fit right in. Just getting started. So how in those citizen groups, what are the key elements you think that are going to attract others to participate of their own free will and with their time and potentially even financial support?
When they can influence what happens in their own local area.
Kind of like
Think,
Daniel
think,
Wall talks about the bioregional specific applications.
well, think global, think global, act local. Going with something that which,
Gosh, where we heard that before? That's been around for what, 20 years or so?
well, a bit longer, I think, Zen. But
Yeah,
yes,
probably.
yeah, yeah. But yes, it is that. But it's about that having that global concept, but bring it down to local, where people can actually affect some kind of control of how their local environment is shaped. When people can have that sense of, yeah, I contributed to that, or I was able to, at least my voice was heard in that.
Hmm.
Then you get a sense of ownership. When we have a sense of ownership, then people will start to engage more. So it's not one big step for mankind. It's lots of little steps.
Absolutely. And in that interaction, do you find that as trust builds, we were talking about vibrations and energy and things earlier, and that's really all that is. So the energy of that collective group changes because the individuals open up and are more willing to participate. What kind of an effect, if you want to throw some logic into here, might that, when we extrapolate that behavior, what could occur with that? I mean, I don't know that you can answer. I don't think I could because we don't know that far. We can't see that far into the future.
Oh,
What we
yeah.
can see is from our own personal perspectives and looking at those around us. What do you find happens in that with your own participation?
My sense is that it is old speculation is that people would collaborate more. So you get networking across those
Hmm.
grouping, and so that the whole becomes greater than the sum of the parts.
And that sense of anticipation I mentioned earlier,
Yeah,
you have just kind of given it the next step of how that plays out. You become curious, you speculate with much more positive opportunities because you're harvesting the knowledge that you have and you're making educated guesses, right, as to how it might be useful.
and allowing voices to be heard.
Hmm.
I don't know about the States, although I can imagine from what I read that what happens there is very similar to what happens here. People's voices aren't being heard.
Right.
And when we can change that, when people's voices are being heard, then massive changes for the good can happen.
Now, do you think the voices aren't being heard because of the colonialist attitude that's still present on the planet?
You can call it colonialist if you like. That's one way.
That's the name that came, the word that came to mind in the moment.
Okay.
It's probably a bit, it can be stated many different ways, but I see that as one
Yeah,
of the most common terms.
yeah. Okay, that's okay. Yeah, yeah, for sure. It's about people being in charge, wanting to stay in control,
Hmm.
and keeping it
Of
limited.
people and resources.
Yes, yeah. Well, that's for sure. Yes, yeah, yeah. At their beck and call. Yes, yeah.
Right. Now, do you see the possibility that we can ascend from that command and control structure um, without much chagrin of others in the process to something that's more workable? Because the systems we have in place are really pretty good. They're well designed. They're just mismanaged.
Yeah. I think hope is crucial because if we don't have that hope, that can happen, then it won't happen. We do need to have,
And without the hope, we don't have the inspiration to do anything.
yeah, sure. But if we, I was looking at it I was thinking it from what flashed through my mind for a moment
Hmm?
was in a business context where many businesses are really command and control. But if you look at the work of Lalou, reinventing organizations, he's done some fascinating work in terms of, now it's a long time since I've read it, so don't ask me for any details, but he's done some fascinating work on how organizations, businesses can structure themselves where people's skills and abilities are harnessed in a totally different way. So they are engaged. And if you take that out of that business context into a societal context, then and link it with hope, then all sorts of things are possible. We
Hmm.
can we can sort of recognize what the damage that we've done to the planet and do something about it. So maybe, just maybe, mankind will survive. Humankind will survive, I should say. The planet will survive anyway.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
The planet,
There's
the
no doubt
planet, the
about
planet,
that.
the
Been
planet
here for
will,
billions of
the
years. And
planet will go on forevermore. The
yeah,
question is whether humankind will go on forevermore.
right. And,
Uh,
there are things happening with the planet that are going to cause some massive shifts and people in places where those earth changes are going to take place simply because we're shifting our axis. North Pole's moved, what, 600 miles a year now?
yeah,
And so those things are going to affect other things. And the human hubris to point at ourselves and say we're the cause of that, I think is a little, you know, pompous.
yeah,
And yet it's still part of it because it's happening simultaneously. It's not necessarily exclusive. And yet these are two separate things that are going on simultaneously that we have to deal with.
yeah.
How do you think we can move through the or find the advantages of stepping back and looking at things from a larger perspective and including those things in how we're seeing things and also how we're distributing that information to the general public without creating mass panic? Or do you think people care enough to even pay attention?
80-20 rule.
Say again?
I said 80-20 rule. Kind of, there will be
Okay.
a few who understand and see the need, and then it's slow going of steady drip of the tap where we engage, educate, and move on, and keep on doing that until we've changed the whole thing.
Mhm.
There's no quick fixes.
No, and from a P&L standpoint, right, that's human resource development.
Yeah,
Those are sunk costs or sunken costs
yeah.
that haven't really been considered. That's the first thing. I was on the board of directors for what's now the talent development Association of Talent Development. It used to be the American Society for Training and Development. I was on
Okay.
the board for the Phoenix, Arizona chapter. And in that process, we're looking at the ramifications of how to expand this. And yet, from a corporate standpoint, HR budgets are the first thing that are cut.
Yeah.
There was and this was 2008, 9, 10. So it was right in the midst of the downturn. There were hotels that had 26 people on staff for training and development that were now down to 2.
Yeah. Yeah.
So and that's the general position from a profit loss standpoint. So how do we shift that to show that, that value that you're cutting is going to cost you in the long run? And as Schwab even said in his book, on COVID-19, that the one thing businesses are going to have to do in this shift of marketplace is become agile. Otherwise, they're not going to survive. Well, what does agile mean?
Yeah.
And I think we're talking about a part of that agility.
Yeah. Makes sense.
Kind of does, doesn't it? And
Yeah.
do we think, do we talk, do we, engage others at that level and just talking about these basic fundamentals of physics and then how it trickles through in our relationships and how those develop, which then trickles through into the structures that we create and how we manage them.
Yeah. It's developing the spiritual leadership from the top.
What we've called spiritual leadership today, because it's been in that woo-woo space.
Yeah.
It's so funny. Um, and yet sad, because we choose to keep that separate, that nothing spiritual has anything to do with the material world, and just the opposite has everything to do with it. It's that you were talking about, the inner moving into the outer. And I think there was a guy a long time ago who said something about make the without as the within. And we've forgotten that.
Yeah.
How,
And it's
how do you, what are some of the basic things that you can offer that would help change the ways people think about things from the depth of experience that you had in the learning that you got from both corporate world and the training that you got from your spiritual development?
there's a program I developed which I was never able to offer because the marketing costs were too high.
Mm.
But it was going to be focused around business leaders, and it drew on my training from Barbara Brennan and reading Peter Senger's book, Coherency.
I was going to say, I thought you were going to say Fifth Discipline.
No, not that one. The Coherence or Coherency is called. Yeah.
Mm.
Which where he embodies the concept of theory U from Sharma.
Right. Otto's the work that he and Peter are doing is just phenomenal. I was part of their, what was it, 32,000 students globally with their program through MIT that was called Transforming Business, Society, and Self.
Yeah.
And that was in 2015 or 16.
I
So
did that. Yeah.
there's a big stone in the pond, and the ripples are still happening.
Yeah. Yeah. That's the kind of scale that needs to happen, and that is perhaps the biggest hope we have. My contribution was very small because what I said was I can take the stuff from Barbara Brennan and the shamanic stuff,
Mm-hmm.
and through over a weekend take people down the U and up through the other side of the U.
Right. Well, in the process of that, for viewers, if you don't know about Theory U, and I hope you find out more about it, it's basically gathering your team together, creating a safe space, centering, and then coming to a place of what he calls co-presencing, which means you're all just kind of empty with the questions. And then the process that needs to develop will flow from there with the construction or with the ideation to begin with of prototypes that then can be tested to see um, what the effects will be in the workplace. Did I describe that fairly well?
Wonderful. Far better than I could have described it, Zen.
I love this stuff. I live for this because it's so inviting, inspiring, and just invigorating when it's in process.
Yes, totally
Right.
invigorating.
And then there's the flip side of that, as I'm sure you experienced, is the languishing of waiting for everybody else to get it, right? They can only see, if they can only feel, if they can only understand, if they can only just trust a little bit to let go of their preconceived beliefs.
Yes. Yes, yes, yes. Very much so.
How do you create an environment for that to happen, as if you can offer that as one of these tasty tidbits for daily transformations that folks might be able to facilitate?
How do I do that? How could I do that?
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Or what
so
might you suggest as to what you found works for you?
um, spend more time in nature. Get out and watch a few sunsets. Get up before dawn and watch the sun coming up. Stay up all night. And if you're not moved, I'll give you a tenner. You cannot not do that and not feel moved.
Mm-hmm. So what I hear you saying is change your habits,
I'm
even
not,
just a little bit. Change a habit and
it's
interject something.
more about opening up to new and different experiences.
Mm-hmm. Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And if I may, add that we have habits, rituals that we follow daily. And so this, in effect, changes that with a conscious choice to do so and putting our attention toward something that is actually able to benefit us and that we choose to engage because of that opportunity of letting go and just being in nature and feeling its warmth or it's cold, depending on where you're living.
And having a sense of awe
Mm.
and perspective. Just that sort of sense that we're a microcosm, we're a speck of dust in something very, very beautiful.
Mm-hmm.
And when we get that perspective, it can help us to sort of recognize that there's something way, way beyond our ego that is far more important than our ego. And when we can stay for that time, that will lead to the change in um, habits that you mentioned a minute ago. But you have to start from the sensation of awareness, or just having that the sense of there are no words can ever describe that moment when you get up before dawn and the sun comes up. No words, just experience it. Then you know.
Mm-hmm.
Or if you lie
Sensational.
if you lie on the desert, if you lie on the desert in Southern California in the middle of the night and watch the stars unfold, I had never seen anything like it. Where I am, there's light pollution everywhere. I had never seen a night sky like that. I didn't know the sky. I didn't know the night sky was like that. It was incredible.
Isn't it?
And I guess where you are in Arizona, that's something you can get to if you're
Oh
far enough
yeah,
out.
go up in the mountains
Yeah,
and you get out of the city lights
yeah,
and the light pollution, but you get up north and the sky when the skies are clear, the views are just amazing.
yeah, yeah.
And you see some other things flying around occasionally too.
Well, when I was, it was helicopters patrolling the southern border. I'm afraid I was in the I did a vision quest in the Anza Borrego Desert in Southern
Uh,
California.
Joshua Tree?
No, Anza-Borrego Desert. Joshua Tree was closed because of the government was short of money, so they closed everything down. But Anza-Borrego is a state desert in Southern California.
Hmm.
Much,
Wonderful
much.
opportunity and beautiful area. And Arizona is much similar, except,
Yeah.
we're all beach and no ocean.
Okay. Yeah. Sure. Yeah. But anyway, but this is it's just this sense of awe you get when you experience something like that. You can never put the lid back on again.
No. And your eyes change
Yes.
too. You can
Yes.
see it in others who have had those kinds of things.
Yeah.
Not everybody, those that are unaware, that have never had those kinds of experience, won't notice the difference. They will notice something special. I mean, this is
Yeah.
my experience, but they won't necessarily, a lot of times it's, oh, that person's kind of weird, right? So and that's probably more prevalent than anything over the decades until COVID hit.
Yeah.
And then coming out of that, the listening, the experiencing, the curiosity has exponentiated.
Yeah. Yeah.
Do you, how do you see this next several years as far, and I know this is going to be speculation because none of us really know, but given what you know, how do you see the effects of this amalgamation of intelligence, of concern, of better questions, and the use of AI in being able to help us to move forward collectively?
As you say, speculation. I see a totally different world within 10 years that we have. Let me backtrack for a moment because the world is
Well,
very
that's a great idea. The vision is one thing. So backstepping, where are we and what's the first steps to get there?
what I sense has been happening for some time now, and I think we're reaching a peak of this, is that a lot of deep trauma, if we can call it that, is surfacing and coming through in all the wars we're seeing.
Hmm.
And I think it's something once we've been through that, and we will get through it, that we'll find a new way of going forward.
Absolutely. And
And
I'll,
that, and that is so that is my answer. How I'm answering the question is we're going through this period of this stuff bubbling through, and then in 10 years' time the world will have been focusing on the what matters for humanity.
absolutely. And I'll offer some evidence of that from another source.
Okay.
A friend of mine, dear friend, his name's Jose Arguez. He's now out there somewhere traveling about, or he might be right here too. He brought out the Mayan calendar to the rest of the world. And I think his first book about it was called The Mayan Factor. And he and I had a chance to have some deep discussions because the Mayan calendar covers cosmic time, if you will.
Yeah.
They call it the Zolkin. And in that, there's progressions, there's cycles. And
Mhm.
according to it, in his interpretation of it, we're in a cycle of a 50-year segue between ages. And that's between the Piscean and the Aquarian age.
Okay.
In that, there was an opening in 1987, what was referred to as the harmonic convergence. So it's like a window opening that then led to a massive escalation of consciousness, insight, awareness, and up to, and it pretty much paralleled the information curve, right? And so at the winter solstice of 2012, which is the apex of that 50-year cycle, there was this collective awareness that was available, a critical mass, if you will, that was achieved. We don't necessarily know how, it's just that this is the explanation of the process, right? Afterwards, what do you do with it? You've got this awareness, this understanding, this internal right? As far as the external and internal, you've got the internal workings going on now. Well, what do you do with it? Simply the fact that you have it changes everything vibrationally.
Mm.
And as your subtle change happens, so do others. Well, that
Yeah.
grows. And what happens is that there's this, it's almost like a grid of integrity, if you will, that begins to rise to the surface. And everything that's not in integrity with itself becomes present. And everybody can see it. Now,
Yeah.
how we see it is yet to be determined, right? But it's available to see. All the chaos that we think is going on are simply aberrant patterns that we haven't recognized and corrected yet.
Yeah.
So that gives us the opportunity. Now we're in the midst of this to now, and the late teens, if you will, really showed that disturbance, and COVID was like the culmination of it. So now we have an opportunity to shift focus and look at life in a different way in order to bring that understanding back into the practical and pragmatic applications where it's necessary. And that's kind of the big picture.
Mm-hmm.
So understanding that process, for one, offers hope.
Mm-hmm.
For another, offers opportunity.
Yes.
And offers the ability to establish some pretty cool relationships in the process.
Yeah. Yeah. For sure.
And I do appreciate that you've been able to offer. And in one last hurrah, if you will, what did you, was there something of import that you would like to express that would be highly impactful as a closing?
Breathe. Simply breathe. Because you shouldn't need a because, but I will give a because. Because when we breathe, opportunities arise. When you really breathe, something opens.
And that moment of silence is where the voice of being can speak.
Yes.
Thank you so much, Charles. This has been a wonderful conversation, and I know our audience will get great value from it as well. I really appreciate your time, your effort, and what you're doing in the world. It's
Thank you,
necessary.
Zen. Thank you, Zen. I appreciate that. And thank you, anybody who's been listening. Thank you for listening.
And namaste and in-law catch. Thanks for sticking with us for this episode of One World in a New World. Again, I'm Zen Benefiel, your host. Yeah, your host with the host and the mostest. Thanks again, and I'll see you next time.